Hi, my name's Sara Rubin. I'm the editor of the Monterey County Weekly newspaper, and I am going to read Chapter 13. Thanks.
Chapter 13. Mac and the boys slept peacefully on the pine needles. Sometime before dawn, Eddie came back. He had gone a long way before he found a Model T. And then when he did, he wondered whether or not it would be a good idea to take the needle out of its seat. It might not fit, so he took the whole carburetor. The boys didn't wake up when he got back. He lay down beside them and slept under the pine trees. There was one nice thing about Model Ts. The parts were not only interchangeable, they were unidentifiable. There is a beautiful view from the Carmel Grade, the curving bay with the waves creaming on the sand, the dune country around Seaside and right at the bottom of the hill, the warm intimacy of town. Mac got up in the dawn and hustled his pants where they bound him, and he stood looking down on the bay. He could see some of the purse seiners coming in. A tanker stood over against Seaside, taking on oil. Behind him, the rabbits stirred in the bush. Then the sun came up and shook the night chill out of the air the way you'd shake a rug. When he felt the first sun warmth, Mac shivered. The boys ate a little bread while Eddie installed the new carburetor. And when it was ready, they didn't bother to crank it. They pushed it out to the highway and coasted in gear until it started. And then Eddie driving, they backed up over the rise, over the top, and turned and headed forward and down past Hatton Fields. In Carmel Valley, the artichoke plants stood gray-green, and the willows were lush against the river. They turned left up the valley. Luck blossomed from the first. A dusty Rhode Island red rooster who had wandered too far from his own farmyard crossed the road, and Eddie hit him without running too far off the road. Sitting in the back of the truck, Hazel picked him as they went and let the feathers fly from his hand, the most widely distributed evidence on record, for there was a little breeze in the morning blowing down from Jamesburg, and some of the red chicken feathers were deposited on Point Lobos, and some even blew out to sea. The Carmel is a lovely little river. It isn't very long, but in its course it has everything a river should have. It rises in the mountains and tumbles down a while, runs through shallows, is dammed to make a lake, spills over the dam, crackles among round boulders, wanders lazily under sycamores, spills into pools where little trout live, drops in against banks where crayfish live. In the winter it becomes a torrent, a mean little fierce river, and in the summer it is a place for children to wade in and for fishermen to wander in. Frogs blink from its banks, and the deep ferns grow beside it. Deer and foxes come to drink from it, secretly in the morning and evening, and now and then a mountain lion crouched flat laps its water. The farms of the rich little valley back up to the river and take its water for the orchards and the vegetables. The quail call beside it, and the wild doves come whistling in at dusk. Raccoons pace its edges looking for frogs. It's everything a river should be. A few miles up the valley, the river cuts in under a high cliff from which vines and ferns hang down. At the base of this cliff there is a pool, green and deep, and on the other side of the pool there is a little sandy place where it is good to sit and cook your dinner. Mac and the boys came down to this place happily. It was perfect. If frogs were available, they would be here. It was a place to relax, a place to be happy. On the way out, they had thriven. In addition to the big red chicken, there was a sack of carrots, which had fallen from a vegetable truck, half a dozen onions, which had not. Mac had a bag of coffee in his pocket. In the truck, there was a 5-gallon can with the top cut off. The winning jug was nearly half full. Such things as salt and pepper had been brought. Mac and the boys would have thought anyone who traveled without salt, pepper, and coffee very silly indeed. Without effort, confusion, or much thought, 4 round stones were rolled together on a little beach. The rooster who had challenged the sunrise of this very day lay dismembered and clean in water in the 5-gallon can with peeled onions about him, while a little fire of dead willow sticks sputtered between the stones, a very little fire. Only fools build big fires. It would take a long time to cook this rooster, for it had taken him a long time to achieve his size and muscularity. But as the water began to boil gently about him, he smelled good from the beginning. Mac gave them a pep talk. "The best time for frogs is at night," he said. "So I guess we'll just lay around till it gets dark." They sat in the shade, and gradually, one by one, they stretched out and slept. Mac was right. Frogs do not move around much in the daytime. They hide under ferns, and they look secretly out of holes under rocks. The way to catch frogs is with a flashlight at night. The men slept knowing they might have a very active night. Only Hazel stayed awake to replenish the little fire under the cooking chicken. There is no golden afternoon next to the cliff. When the sun went over it at about 2 o'clock, a whispering shade came to the beach. The sycamores rustled in the afternoon breeze. Little water snakes slipped down to the rocks and then gently entered the water and swam along through the pool, their heads held up like little periscopes and a tiny wake spreading behind them. A big trout jumped in the pool. The gnats and mosquitoes, which avoided the sun, came out and buzzed over the water. All of the sun bugs, the flies, the dragonflies, the wasps, the hornets went home. And as the shadow came to the beach, as the first quail began to call, Mac and the boys awakened. The smell of the chicken stew was heartbreaking. Hazel had picked a fresh bay leaf from a tree by the river, and he dropped it in. The carrots were in now. Coffee in its own can was simmering on its own rock far enough from the flames so that it did not boil too hard. Mac awakened, started up, stretched, staggered to the pool, washed his face with cupped hands, hacked, spit, washed out his mouth, broke wind, tightened his belt, scratched his legs, combed his wet hair with his fingers, drank from the jug, belched, and sat down by the fire. "By God, that smells good," he said. Men all do about the same things when they wake up. Mac's process was loosely the one all of them followed, and soon they had all come to the fire and complimented Hazel. Hazel stuck his pocket knife into the muscles of the chicken. "He ain't going to be what you'd call tender," Hazel said. "You'd have to cook him about 2 weeks to get him tender. How old do you judge he was, Mac?" "I'm 48 and I ain't as tough as he is," said Mac. Eddie said, "How old can a chicken get, do you think? That's if nobody pushes him around or he doesn't get sick." "That's something nobody isn't ever going to find out," said Jones. It was a pleasant time. The jug went around and warmed them. Jones said, "Eddie, I don't mean to complain none. I was just thinking, suppose you had 2 or 3 jugs back of the bar. Suppose you put all the whiskey in one, and all the wine in another, and all the beer in another." A slightly shocked silence followed the suggestion. "I didn't mean nothing," said Jones quickly. "I like it this way." Jones talked too much then, because he knew he had made a social blunder and he wasn't able to stop. "What I like about it is the way you never know what kind of a drunk you're going to get out of it," he said. "You take whiskey," he said hurriedly. "You know more or less what you'll do. A fighting guy fights and a crying guy cries, but this," he said magnanimously, "why, you don't know whether it'll run you up a pine tree or start you swimming to Santa Cruz. It's more fun that way," he said weakly. "Speaking of swimming," said Mac, to fill the indelicate place in the conversation and to shut Jones up, "I wonder whatever happened to that guy, McKinley Moran. Remember that deep-sea diver?" "I remember him," said Hughie. "I and him used to hang around together. He just didn't get much work, and then he got to drinking. It's kind of tough on you, diving and drinking. Got to worrying, too. Finally, he sold his suit and helmet and pump and went on a hell of a drunk, and then he left town. I don't know where he went. He wasn't no good after he went down after that wop that he took down with the anchor from the 12 Brothers. McKinley just dove down, bust his eardrums, and he wasn't no good after that. Didn't hurt the wop a bit." Mac sampled the jug again. He used to make a lot of dough during Prohibition, Mac said. Used to get $25 a day from the government to dive looking for liquor on the bottom, and he got $3 a case from Louis for not finding it. Had it worked out, so he brought up 1 case a day to keep the government happy. Louis didn't mind that none. Made it so they didn't get in no new divers. McKinley made a lot of dough. Yeah, said Hughie, but he's like everybody else. Gets some dough and he wants to get married. He got married 3 times before his dough run out. I could always tell. He'd buy a white fox fur piece and bang, next thing you know, he's married. I wonder what happened to Gay, Eddie asked. It was the first time they had spoken of him. Same thing, I guess, said Mac. You just can't trust a married guy. No matter how much he hates his old lady, he'll go back to her. Get to thinking and brooding and back he'll go. You can't trust him no more. Take Gay, said Mac. His old lady hits him. But I bet you when Gay's away from her 3 days, he gets it figured out that it's his fault, and he goes back to make it up to her. They ate long and daintily, spearing out pieces of chicken, holding the dripping pieces until they cooled, and then gnawing the muscled meat from the bone. They speared the carrots on pointed willow switches, and finally they passed the can and drank the juice. And around them the evening crept in as delicately as music. The quail called out each other down to the water. The trout jumped in the pool, and the moths came down and fluttered about the pool as the daylight mixed into the darkness. They passed the coffee can about, and they were warm and fed and silent. At last Mac said, God damn it, I hate a liar. Who's been lying to you? Eddie asked. Oh, I don't mind a guy that tells a little one to get along or to hop up a conversation, but I hate a guy that lies to himself. Who done that? Eddie asked. Me, said Mac, and maybe you guys. Here we are, he said earnestly. The whole goddamn shabby lot of us. We worked it out that we wanted to give Doc a party. So we come out here and have a hell of a lot of fun. Then we'll go back and get the dough from Doc. There's 5 of us, so we'll drink 5 times as much liquor as he will. And I ain't sure we're doing it for Doc. I ain't sure we're doing it for ourselves. And Doc's too nice a fella to do that to. Doc is the nicest fella I ever knew. I don't want to be the kind of guy that would take advantage of him. You know, one time I put the B on him for $1. I give him a hell of a story. Right in the middle I seen he knew goddamn well the story was so much malarkey. So right in the middle I says, Doc, that's a fucking lie. And he put his hand in his pocket and he brought out $1. Mac, he says, I figure a guy that needs it bad enough to make up a lie to get it really needs it. And he give me the $1. I paid him that $1 back the next day. I never did spend it. Just kept it overnight and then give it back to him. Hazel said, there ain't nobody likes a party better than Doc. We're giving him the party. What the hell is the beef? I don't know, said Mac. I'd just like to give him something when I didn't get most of it back. How about a present? Hughie suggested. Suppose we just bought the whiskey and give it to him and let him do what he wants. Now you're talking, said Mac. That's just what we'll do. We'll just give him the whiskey and fade out. You know what'll happen, said Ernie. Henry and them people from Carmel will smell that whiskey out, and then instead of 5 of us, there'll be 20. Doc told me one time himself they can smell him frying a steak from Cannery Row clear down to Point Sur. I don't see the percentage. He'd come out better if we give him the party ourselves. Mac considered this reasoning. Maybe you're right, he said at last. But suppose we give him something except whiskey, maybe cufflinks with his initials. Oh, horse shit, said Hazel. Doc don't want stuff like that. The night was in by now, and the stars were white in the sky. Hazel fed the fire, and it put a little room of light on the beach. Over the hill, a fox was barking sharply. And now, in the night, the smell of sage came down from the hills. The water chuckled on the stones from where it went out of the deep pool. Mac was mulling over the last piece of reasoning when the sound of footsteps on the ground made them turn. A man dark and large stalked near, and he had a shotgun over his arm, and a pointer walked shyly and delicately at his heel. "What the hell are you doing here?" he asked. Nothing, said Mac. The land's posted. No fishing, hunting, fires, camping. Now you just pack up and put that fire out and get off this land. Mac stood up humbly. I didn't know, Captain, he said. Honest, we never seen the sign, Captain. There's signs all over. You couldn't have missed them. Look, Captain, we made a mistake and we're sorry, said Mac. He paused and looked closely at the slouching figure. You're a military man, aren't you, sir? I can always tell. Military men don't carry his shoulders the same as ordinary people. I was in the army so long, I can always tell. Imperceptibly, the shoulders of the man straightened, nothing obvious, but he held himself differently. I don't allow fires on my place, he said. Well, we're sorry, said Mac. We'll get right out, Captain. You see, we're working for some scientists. We're trying to get some frogs. They're working on cancer, and we're helping out getting some frogs. The man hesitated for a moment. What do they do with the frogs? He asked. Well, sir, said Mac, they give cancer to the frogs, and then they can study and experiment, and they got it nearly licked if they can just get some frogs. But if you don't want us on your land, Captain, we'll get right out. Never would have come in if we knew. Suddenly Mac seemed to see the pointer for the first time. By God, that's a fine-looking bitch, he said enthusiastically. She looks like Nola that won the field trials in Virginia last year. She's a Virginia dog, Captain. The captain hesitated, and then he lied. Yes, he said shortly. She's lame. Tick got her right on the shoulder. Mac was instantly solicitous. Mind if I look, Captain? Come, girl. Come on, girl. The pointer looked up at her master and then sidled up to Mac. Pile on some twigs so I can see, he had said to Hazel. It's up where she can't lick it, said the captain, and he leaned over Mac's shoulder to look. Mac pressed out some pus out of the evil-looking crater on the dog's shoulder. I had a dog once had a thing like this, and it went right in and killed him. She just had pups, didn't she? Yes, said the captain. 6. I put iodine on that place. No, said Mac, that won't draw. You got any Epsom salts up at your place? Yes, there's a big bottle. Well, you make a hot poultice of Epsom salts and put it on there. She's weak, you know, from the pups. Be a shame if she got sick now. You'd lose the pups, too. The pointer looked deep into Mac's eyes, and then she licked his hand. Tell you what I'll do, Captain. I'll look after her myself. Epsom salt will do the trick. That's the best thing. The captain stroked the dog's head. You know, I've got a pond up by the house that's so full of frogs I can't sleep nights. Why don't you look up there? They bellow all night. I'd be glad to get rid of them. That's mighty nice of you, said Mac. I'll bet those docks would thank you for that. But I'd like to get a poultice on this dog. He turned to the others. You put out this fire, he said. Make sure there ain't a spark left and clean up around. You don't want to leave no mess. I and the captain will go and take care of Nola here. You fellows follow along when you get cleared up. Mac and the captain walked away together. Hazel kicked sand on the fire. I bet Mac could have been president of the U.S. if he wanted, he said. What could he do with it if he had it, Jones asked. There wouldn't be no fun in that.